I'm 42 years old, and for 7 years, I've swallowed every bitter word, every snide glance, every quiet betrayal without a single word of pushback. My daughter Lila just turned 5 when our family's dance instructor abruptly handed in her resignation, and that afternoon, every thin layer of the fake peace I'd clung to for years frayed clean through. The last lesson wrapped up, and the young woman, Mia, everyone called her, twisted her glossy blonde hair behind her back, stepped forward, and slipped her palm into mine with a soft, practiced smile. She thanked me for all my kindness over the 2 years she'd worked out of our state's private studio, her eyes glinting like she expected to see grief, rage, or broken heartbreak written all over my face. I didn't give her any of it. I knew perfectly well I'd never been the one showering her with favors, covering her studio fees, sending her expensive designer gift baskets for every holiday, or slipping her blank check envelopes after every late-night private session. That man belonged to me, Ethan Hale, my husband of 8 miserable years. Every stolen glance, every secret text, every overnight trip he'd claimed was for board meetings all traced straight back to Mia. I'd spent years convincing myself I could survive this hollow marriage, trapped in a cage Ethan built with cold cash and ruthless threats. But the second Mia's pregnancy test came back positive. Ethan sat me down and said he wanted a divorce. That single sentence cracked the fragile numbness I'd wrapped around my heart for nearly a decade, and for the first time in so long, I let myself wonder if freedom might actually be within reach. Mia stepped out of the studio's front door, and Ethan's black luxury SUV idled right at the curb. He leaned against the open driver's side door, a half-smoked cigarette dangling between his fingers, smoke curling up to blur his sharp features. When his gaze locked onto mine across the driveway, there was no warmth, no softness, only icy, unyielding resentment, like I was an annoying obstacle standing between him and the life he thought he deserved with Mia. I pulled my hand free from Mia's grip, slow and deliberate, my tone flat, stripped of all emotion, polite to the point of distance. You should head out. Ethan's waiting for you. Mia's lips pressed thin, frustration flicking across her youthful features when she couldn't bait a single tear or shout out of me. She'd spent 2 years dropping subtle hints, lingering around Ethan whenever I was in a room, posting coded captions online about secret love, hoping I'd snap and give Ethan an excuse to cast me aside entirely. When I stayed calm, she had no choice but to turn and walk toward the car. The SUV's tires peeled away from the driveway, leaving me standing alone on the concrete, my shoulders rigid, every muscle in my body locked tight. A tiny, wobbly voice pulled me out of my blank daze a second later. Mommy, why did Daddy drive away with Mia? Lila's small hands wrapped around the hem of my linen skirt, her big hazel eyes wide and confused, completely oblivious to the ugly secret unraveling right in front of her. I knelt down and lifted her into my arms immediately, forcing a gentle, warm smile onto my face for her sake. I'd never let her see the rot eating away at our family, not if I could help it. There aren't any Ubers running out this far, baby. Daddy's just giving Mia a ride home. Lila nodded slowly, resting her head against my shoulder, and I carried her back into the sprawling mansion Ethan owned, every quiet room echoing with emptiness. I bathed her, read her 2 bedtime stories, tucked her beneath her unicorn comforter, and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead before slipping out of her bedroom. The grandfather clock in the entryway struck midnight, and Ethan still hadn't come home. I didn't need to guess where he was 10 minutes prior. Mia had uploaded a new Instagram story. The frame focused on 2 interlaced hands, Ethan's long, wealthy fingers wrapped tight around hers, with a blurry shot of a hotel penthouse balcony in the background. No caption needed. The image alone screamed their secret affair to every mutual acquaintance following her account. I remembered the night they'd first slept together, 2 years prior. Mia had posted a careless, accidental story that she deleted within 30 seconds, but I'd seen it before it vanished. My first night with Mr. Hale. That night, I'd stood in our master bathroom, silent tears burning down my cheeks, staring at my reflection split open by a jagged, bleeding wound I'd hidden from everyone ever since. I'd already birthed Lila for Ethan by then, forced into pregnancy after he'd threatened to ruin my parents' small family business if I refused to start a family with him. For years, I'd accepted I'd be chained to him forever, bound by our daughter, and all the leverage he held over every person I loved. But now Mia carried his child, and Ethan was ready to commit fully to her. Maybe, after all this time, I could finally break free. Days blurred into a monotonous routine after that afternoon. I kept up every wifely duty flawlessly. I scheduled Lila's tutoring, coordinated catered dinner parties for Ethan's business partners, supervised the household staff, maintained a picture-perfect mother and spouse facade for anyone watching. But Ethan's treatment of me turned colder by the day, his stares calculating, like he was plotting something I couldn't yet parse. One night, once Lila was sound asleep upstairs, Ethan called me into his private office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, and 3 crushed cigarette butts littered the crystal ashtray on his oak desk. He turned to face me, his expression eerily calm, no trace of the usual anger or disdain he reserved just for me. Clara, I'm setting you free. My waist jolted beneath his palm the second his arm wrapped around me, like I'd touched an open flame. I blinked slowly, convinced I'd misheard his words after years of endless captivity. What? A low, bitter chuckle rumbled in his chest, and he lifted a hand to brush stray strands of hair back from my face, his touch hollow, devoid of any real tenderness. You know exactly what I mean. Mia's pregnant, the baby's mine. Beneath my composed exterior, my mind spiraled into chaos, but I kept my head bowed, careful not to let the faint spark of hope glinting in my eyes show. I couldn't forget the early months of our marriage, back when I'd still fought against the life he'd forced onto me. I tried running once, packing a bag to meet my college boyfriend, a kind art student who'd loved me gently before Ethan intervened. Ethan tracked me down within hours, surrounded the train station with armed security guards, dragged me back to this mansion, and cornered me against the wall of our bedroom that night, his irises bloodshot, borderline feral. The more you fight me, the more obsessed I get, he whispered, his fingers light but threatening around my throat. Keep testing me, Clara, but I'll play this game with you as long as you want. Stay obedient by my side, and maybe someday I'll grow bored enough to let you walk away. Those words haunted every quiet moment I'd had alone for 8 years. I couldn't trust this sudden offer of freedom, but the urge to grasp it burned too bright to ignore. I lifted my head slightly, voice barely above a murmur. Truly, you let me leave? The faint smile on his lips vanished instantly, his eyes draining of all warmth. Before I could process the shift in his mood, he slammed me forward against the hard edge of his desk, his breath hot against my ear, tone dark and possessive, almost demonic. I can't let you go, Clara. I will never let you walk away from me. Ethan claimed he couldn't release me, yet he'd built an entire separate life for Mia outside the walls of our estate. It was clear Mia occupied a unique place in his world. Prior to her, he'd never wasted time or money on any other woman, not a single one, in all the years we'd been together. Their 2-year affair never faded, never lost its spark. He treated her with soft patience, showered her with gifts, gave her the autonomy and freedom I'd begged for since the day we married. He let Mia waltz into our home whenever she pleased, let her throw subtle jabs and digs at me right in front of Lila, never once stepping in to defend me. Every night, he stumbled back through our front door, his suit jacket reeking of Mia's expensive floral perfume, and I learned to look away, to pretend I smelled nothing at all. I endured every slight, every humiliation, clinging to the quiet hope he'd tire of Mia eventually, turn back to me only to grow bored and sign divorce papers. I couldn't wrap my head around why Mia's pregnancy hadn't pushed him to cut me loose entirely. I thought back to the very start of our relationship, when Ethan had fixated on me out of nowhere, determined to make me his wife no matter the cost. He had used every cruel tactic imaginable to tear me apart from my college boyfriend, threatening to fire both of the young man's parents from their long-term corporate jobs if we stayed together. The art student had broken up with me in a coffee shop downtown, tears streaking his cheeks, apologizing over and over for surrendering to Ethan's blackmail. After he left, Ethan stepped out of his town car, grinning in unbridled victory, and pulled me tight against his chest. You belong only to me, Clara. Anyone who dares to want you will pay a steep price. Back then, I'd seen raw, overwhelming love tangled with unhinged madness in his eyes. If obsession was Ethan's version of love, I'd accepted my fate, broken and trapped, resigned to live out my days locked beside him. But Mia was a complete exception. He treated her with gentle respect, gave her space, never controlled her every move the way he controlled mine. He had long since stopped loving me, yet he refused to set me free. The desperate desire to escape him gnawed at my brain nonstop, bringing back the crippling insomnia I'd struggled with in the first few years of our marriage. Ethan hadn't returned to the mansion for nearly a full week after the dance studio incident, giving me rare breathing room to gather my thoughts. Once I dropped Lila off at her private elementary school one morning, I drove straight to the downtown medical clinic for a full checkup. If I wouldn't care for my own body, no one else would bother. I exited the exam wing of the clinic, clutching a folder of lab results, and froze mid-step when I spotted Ethan across the waiting area. Mia hung on his arm, her stomach barely starting to show. A bright, smug smile stretched across her face as she rambled on about prenatal vitamins and baby names. Ethan stood listening with endless patience, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored slacks, a soft expression I'd never once seen directed at me. A split second later, Ethan's gaze locked onto mine, and he instinctively took one step forward like he planned to cross the room toward me. Mia tightened her grip on his arm instantly, cutting off his movement, and the two of them sauntered straight over to my spot in the hallway, her tone dripping with deliberate arrogance. You've known about Ethan and me for 2 whole years now, haven't you? Mia tilted her chin upward, feigning innocent confusion. I won't hide it any longer. We're deeply in love. I stayed silent, offering no reaction, and that only fueled her smug confidence. She leaned closer, eyes searching my face for any flicker of jealousy or hurt. Aren't you upset at all? I stole your husband, your daughter's father. Why haven't you yelled at me, kicked me out of your house? Every other wife in my position would have screamed, fought, broken down crying, but my heartbeat stayed steady, calm, no anger or grief stirring inside my chest. My mind had grown slow and numb after years of suppression, and I stood quiet for far too long. Ethan's stare bored into my skin, growing more irritable by the second, until he snapped out an order without a single ounce of consideration for me. Take this prescription to the pharmacy counter and pick up Mia's prenatal medication. He held out a crumpled paper slip between his fingers, the wedding band on his left hand glinting under the clinic's fluorescent lights, shoving the paper toward me like I was a hired housekeeper tasked with running his mistress's errands. Something inside me snapped after years of swallowing every unfair demand without pushback. Before I could second-guess myself, I swatted the prescription hard out of his grasp, sending it fluttering to the linoleum floor between our feet. Mia's your woman, Ethan. Why does all this work fall to me? I'm not here to run your errands for free. 3 pairs of eyes locked on me in shock. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't fought back against anything he'd done in years. Even when I'd walked in on him and Mia in our guest's suite months prior, I'd quietly closed the bedroom door and headed downstairs to make dinner, determined not to disturb them. Standing there in that clinic hallway, standing up for myself for the first time in nearly a decade, a quiet rush of relief washed over me. I didn't wait for either of them to respond. I stepped forward, deliberately pressing the toe of my leather shoe down hard on Ethan's polished dress shoe, shot him one sharp, unyielding glare, and turned to walk out of the building as fast as I could. Behind me, Ethan's loud, unrestrained laughter echoed down the hallway, a sound that sent cold dread racing down my spine. I knew that laughter wasn't amusement. It was the dangerous, amused rage he got whenever I dared defy his rules. I didn't need to wait long for consequences to land. That same evening, after nearly a week of staying away, Ethan came back to the mansion. Lila spotted him the second he stepped through the front door, immediately letting go of my hand and sprinting across the marble foyer to leap into his arms. The two laughed and played on the couch while I slipped into the kitchen to help the live-in housekeeper, Margaret, chop vegetables for dinner. There was no real work for me to complete. Margaret handled all meal prep, cleaning, and household maintenance without my assistance, so I lingered off to the side, lost in blank, distant thought. Margaret glanced over at me chopping carrots half-heartedly, heaving a quiet, sympathetic sigh. Ma'am, Mr. Hale worries about you every single day he's gone. He calls me every morning to ask how you and Lila are holding up, but I can't help but notice how tense you get whenever he's around. Are you afraid of him? The word, afraid, had been etched into my soul the second Ethan dragged me into this forced marriage. I thought back to every attempt I had made to escape him and the brutal repercussions that followed each time. The first escape attempt cost my ex-boyfriend his full-time corporate position, Ethan calling the man's CEO to fabricate false misconduct claims that got him fired on the spot. The second time I snuck out overnight, Ethan fired our head butler, a man who'd served his family for a decade, solely because he'd failed to lock the back gate properly. The third time I tried to run away, he interfered with my younger brother's engagement, paying the bride's family a large sum of money to call off the wedding entirely. When security guards dragged me back to the mansion after that third escape, I'd broken down sobbing, begging Ethan to explain why he refused to let me live my own life. He'd swirled brandy in a crystal glass, watching my breakdown with cold amusement, his tone unforgiving and cruel. Everything you care about means nothing to me, Clara. You'll never win against me. I learned my lesson quickly after that. Every time I dared to show even a hint of resistance, Ethan retaliated against the people I loved most. He knew I carried too many attachments, too many people I couldn't bear to hurt, and he weaponized every single one to trap me in place. A deep, lazy voice pulled me out of my grim memories, and I looked up to find Ethan leaning against the kitchen doorframe, Lila still curled up in his arms. Hiding in here to avoid me? I always curated a warm, gentle persona in front of Lila, desperate to shield her from the toxicity poisoning our marriage. I smoothed out my neutral expression, forcing a faint, weary smile, and stretched out my arms to take our daughter from him. I'm just helping Margaret prep dinner. The second Lila shifted into my grasp, Ethan leaned forward and pressed a fleeting, possessive kiss against my cheek, his voice low enough only for my ears to catch the underlying accusation. When you saw Mia and me at the clinic today, were you jealous? I'd expected him to confront me about stomping on his shoe or swatting the prescription slip out of his hand, not fixate on whether I felt jealousy toward his mistress. I stayed silent through dinner, through Lila's bath and bedtime routine, and once Ethan stepped out of the master bathroom in a soft cotton robe later that night, I finally spoke the truth I'd been holding back for years. You don't need to test me, Ethan. I don't feel a single ounce of jealousy toward Mia, and you two can carry on with your relationship without worrying about me. Jealousy only existed for people you loved, and he'd long since lost any right to my affection. Ethan's casual hum cut off mid-throat. He reached out in one sharp movement, wrapping his fingers around my wrist and yanking me forward until my back slammed against the mattress of our shared bed, his weight pinning me down with no room to pull away. Clara, do you even have a heart? Ethan's fingers dug into my jaw, forcing my chin up until I had nowhere to look but straight into his bloodshot eyes. That same feral, unhinged glint I'd seen after every failed escape attempt burned right through me, like he'd been bottling this exact rant for years and I'd finally pushed him over the edge to let it spill. I have a mistress. I parade her right in front of you. I drag this dead marriage out year after year and refuse to sign divorce papers. Do you honestly not see why I do all of this? His voice cracked, his other fist slamming down hard enough on the mattress to make the bed frame rattle. I flinched, every muscle in my body locking up on instinct from years of learned fear. If you'd cared about me even a little, if you'd paid me half the attention you pay that daughter of yours, you would have figured it out a long time ago. The weight of his words hung thick in the air. I stared up at him, blank and uncomprehending. All these years I'd thought he kept me around out of stubborn pride, out of a need to win, out of some twisted sense of ownership. Never once had I considered he might be chasing a reaction. He went limp all at once, releasing my jaw and rolling onto his back beside me, a bitter, breathless laugh bubbling up out of his chest. IT sounded half mad, half broken. I lay rigid beside him, staring at the ceiling, until his phone started buzzing on the nightstand, over and over, cutting through the quiet of the room. He ignored it. The laughter didn't stop. For a split second, I thought I saw glistening wetness at the corner of his eye, but I wrote it off as a trick of the lamplight. Ethan Hale didn't cry. Men like him didn't feel regret. When the phone rang a fourth time, I sighed and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. I bent to pick it up off the floor where he'd knocked it earlier, and Mia's name lit up the screen. Bright and unapologetic. I hesitated for 2 seconds, then held it out toward him without looking. She's calling you. We both knew exactly who she was. Ethan finally stopped laughing. He lifted one hand, motioning for me to hand it to him. The second our fingers brushed, he wrapped his palm around my wrist and held me in place, pressing the answer button and putting it on speaker. Mia's high, sweet voice filled the room immediately, thick with fake concern. Ethan, did you forget we're supposed to have dinner with my parents tonight? I've been waiting for an hour. Where are you? I stared at the wall, my face neutral, and gave his arm a small, impatient tug. You should go. You don't want to make a bad impression on her family. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. He let go of my wrist, sat up, and started yanking his clothes on right there in the bedroom, like he was deliberately making a point. When he reached the door, he paused, his back to me, his voice cold and sharp enough to cut. Mia's my woman. Her family is my family. Don't get it twisted, Clara. You don't get to tell me where to go or what to do. And you sure as hell don't matter more than she does. Know your place. The door slammed shut behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to his SUV peel out of the driveway. For 8 years, I'd carried that quiet, heavy fear of him, that instinct to shrink and obey. But for the first time, that fear was starting to curdle into something harder, colder. I wasn't just numb anymore. I was tired of being the punching bag for every single person in this family. 3 days later, the story broke. I was folding laundry in my bedroom when my phone blew up with texts from old acquaintances. TMZ had posted a full gallery of photos. Ethan holding Mia's elbow as they walked out of the downtown OBGYN clinic, her hand resting on her tiny baby bump, him leaning in to say something that made her giggle. The headline blared, "Hail Corp CEO expecting secret baby with long-term mistress. Wife nowhere in sight." It was the first time he'd ever been publicly tied to another woman. I'd always assumed his team paid off every tabloid and blogger to keep his affairs quiet. This time, he let it spread. He was ready to bring Mia out into the open, ready to give her the public status I'd never gotten. A tiny, foolish spark of hope flared in my chest. If he was that serious about her, surely divorce was finally on the table. That hope died 10 minutes later, when Lila came barreling into my room, her tablet clutched in one hand, her face streaked with tears. A girl in her class had sent her the article, laughing and saying her dad didn't love her anymore. "Mommy, is it true? Is Daddy leaving us for Mia?" She hiccuped, fat tears rolling down her cheeks. "Is he gonna have a new baby and forget about me?" My chest ached so bad I could barely breathe. I knelt down and pulled her into my arms, rocking her, murmuring the same empty lies I told her 100 times. But she didn't buy it this time. She squirmed out of my lap, grabbed her watch, and tried to call Ethan again and again. Every call went straight to voicemail. Frantic, she pulled up Mia's contact. Mia had given her the number months ago, saying she could call any time she wanted to talk to Aunt Mia, and hit dial before I could stop her. Mia answered on the second ring, her voice syrupy sweet. Lila boop. What's up, sweetie? Give me my daddy back. Lila screamed, fat tears spilling faster. I want my daddy home. Mia giggled, slow and smug, and I knew she'd done it on purpose. She'd waited for Lila to call just so she could say exactly what she said next, loud enough for me to hear too. Your daddy's right here with me, silly. If you want to see him every day, you should come live with us instead of with your mom. Then we can all be a family together. Lila wailed. I snatched the watch off her wrist, hit end call, and called for Margaret to take her upstairs and draw her a bath. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely breathe. I called Ethan next, and when he finally picked up, his voice was lazy, half distracted, like he'd been interrupted mid-kiss. What? Your girlfriend just told my 5-year-old daughter to move in with her so she can see her dad. My voice was ice. Every bit of my usual restraint fraying thin. Get back here. Fix this. Now. He said he'd be right over. I waited. An hour passed. 2. The doorbell finally rang, but it wasn't Ethan standing on the porch. It was Mia, alone, with that same simpering smile on her face. I don't remember much after that. I'd taken a low dose of sleeping pill an hour earlier to try to calm my nerves, and I laid down with Lila until she fell asleep. The next thing I knew, Margaret was shaking me awake, her face white with panic. Mrs. Hale, Lila's gone. The back gate was left open. I've called Mr. Hale 10 times. He won't answer. Mia's phone goes straight to voicemail, too. My blood turned to ice. I threw the covers off and ran, barefoot, not even stopping to grab shoes. I was halfway down the grand staircase when my foot slipped on the polished marble. I tumbled down the last 6 steps, slamming my shoulder and knee into the tile, my head throbbing where it hit the banister. The pain knocked the panic right out of me, clearing my head in one sharp, brutal second. I pushed myself up, ignoring the stinging scrapes on my arms, and started barking orders. Margaret, call 911 right now. Then call Mr. and Mrs. Hale Sr. Tell them Lila's missing. They have connections. They can get the whole county looking for her faster than we can. I grabbed my keys and ran out the front door, sprinting down the street toward the park Lila-like. I called Mia again and again, each call going straight to voicemail. Rage burned in my throat, hot and bitter. I'd spent 2 years letting her walk all over me, letting her make snide comments, letting her parade through my house, because I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't fight back, she'd leave Lila out of it. I'd been so stupid. Nice girls didn't win with people like her. They just got their kids taken away. I searched the neighborhood for 6 straight hours. By the time the sun came up, the police had set up a command center in our living room, and Ethan's parents had arrived with a team of private investigators. Eleanor Hale marched into the house like she owned the place, her designer heels clicking sharp on the marble. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, dizzy and exhausted, when she marched right up to me and started screaming. This is all your fault. You never could keep my son's attention. Could you? Parading around here all cold and frigid, driving him into the arms of another woman. And now you can't even watch your own child. If anything happens to my granddaughter, I will make sure Ethan divorces you and leaves you with nothing. It was the same speech she'd given me 100 times. For 8 years I'd stood there and taken it head bowed, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Not this time. I lifted my head, looked her dead in the eye, and swatted her pointing finger right out of my face. My voice was rough and raw, but steady as stone. Then make him divorce me to go on dot, or better yet, do what you did 3 years ago. Slip something in my drink, hire a man to sneak into my bedroom, take photos, and try to make Ethan throw me out for cheating. You couldn't control your son, so you decided to punish me instead. If you're so mad, go yell at him to go make him sign the papers that I'd love to see you try. Eleanor's face went sheet white. She thought I'd been unconscious that night. She thought I'd never found out who was really behind it. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For the first time in my life, I'd shut Ethan Hale's mother up. Ethan didn't show up at the police station until noon the next day. He looked like he'd crawled out of a dumpster. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, smudged with bright red lipstick. He was wearing ratty hotel slippers, no socks. His hair a tangled mess. Harold Hale took one look at him and walked right over and slapped him so hard across the face Ethan's head snapped to the side. No one said a word. Ethan didn't even react. His eyes were scanning the room, wild and frantic, until they landed on me. I was huddled in a chair in the corner, my hair a mess, my face pale, my scraped arms wrapped around my knees. He ran to me, actually ran, almost tripping over a chair on the way, and dropped to his knees in front of me, yanking me into a tight, shaking hug. He reeked of whiskey and Mia's perfume. "Clara, I'm here. It's okay. We'll find her. I promise we'll find her." His whole body was trembling. I couldn't tell if he was scared for Lila, or scared of what I'd do if we didn't find her, or scared he'd finally messed up so bad even he couldn't fix it. Then I saw her. Mia stepped through the station door, holding Ethan's suit jacket over her arm, her eyes all red and puffy, like she'd been crying. She walked slow, one hand resting on her stomach, her voice soft and pitiful. "Ethan, baby, you just got out of the shower. Put this on. You'll catch a cold." Something inside me snapped completely. I shoved Ethan off me so hard, he stumbled backward. I marched straight over to Mia, grabbed a fistful of her stupid, perfect blonde hair, and hauled her toward me, my voice a raw scream. "Where is she? What did you do with my daughter?" Hands grabbed at me from every side. Security guards, a uniformed cop, and Ethan. Ethan's hand was the strongest, his wedding band digging into my arm as he ripped me off of her and shoved me away. I lost my balance. My hip slammed hard into the edge of a metal waiting chair, and I went down, my forehead cracking against the leg. Warm blood trickled down into my eye, blurring everything red. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't stand up. I just knelt there on the cold linoleum, broken and desperate, and begged. "Mia, please, give her back. Whatever you want. Whatever money, whatever house, whatever title. You can have all of it. Just give me my daughter back." A loud, sickening thud echoed through the station. Eleanor shrieked. "Ethan, what are you doing? Stop hitting your head on the wall." "Ethan, no." Mia waited. "Think about the baby. Our baby can't grow up without a daddy." "Shut up." His voice was low, dangerous, dead calm. The whole room went quiet. I blinked blood out of my eye and saw him standing there, a streak of red running down the side of his head from where he'd slammed his forehead into the concrete wall. He walked over to me, grabbed a handful of tissues from the front desk, and knelt down to dab at my forehead so gently it made my skin crawl. The police pulled Mia into an interview room a minute later. Eleanor fussed over Ethan's head, wailing about how he was going to give himself a concussion. Harold called their family doctor, barking orders into the phone. 40 minutes later, the detective came out and relayed her side of the story, flat and unemotional. She says Mr. Hale had an emergency work call he could miss, so she volunteered to go over and talk to the little girl to calm her down. She claims Lila started hitting and kicking her, and since she's pregnant, she couldn't defend herself, so she pushed her back lightly. She says she told the kid if she kept being mean, her dad would love the new baby more. Then the girl ran out the back gate, and she tried to chase her, but couldn't keep up. My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I'd spent 8 years swallowing every humiliation, forcing a smile, playing happy family. Also, Lila would never have to feel unloved or unwanted. And this woman had waltzed into my house and told my 5-year-old her own father would replace her the second a new baby came along. I grabbed the first heavy thing I could reach, a stainless steel water bottle sitting on the chair beside me, and hurled it at her as soon as she walked out of the interview room. Ethan stepped in front of her. The bottle hit him square in the shoulder. He didn't flinch. He grabbed both my wrists, holding me tight, his voice raw and pleading. "Clara, stop. She's pregnant. You'll hurt the baby." That was the moment I truly, deeply hated him. Not just feared him, not just resented him, hated him with every fiber of my being. Our daughter was missing, out there alone, scared, and he was still standing between me and the woman who'd chased her out of the house. I slapped him once, twice, over and over, as hard as I could, until my palm stung and my arm ached. He didn't move. He didn't block me. He just stood there and took every single one, his eyes glistening like he thought he deserved it. When my arm gave out, he caught my hand in his, rubbing my sore knuckles with his thumb like he was still the same boy who'd thought obsession was love. I wanted divorce. My voice was flat, dead, final. He dropped his head. I felt a cold drop of water land on the back of my hand. Before either of us could say another word, the detective's phone rang. He answered it, and his face lit up with relief. "They found her. West Side Precinct just called. An older woman and her son turned her in about 10 minutes ago. They're waiting for you to come ID her." I was out the door before he finished the sentence. I ran for the parking lot, Ethan right on my heels. Then he stopped, I glanced back and saw him turn around, walking back to Mia to wrap an arm around her waist, helping her walk slow. By the time I climbed into the back of the police cruiser with Harold and Eleanor, Ethan was still by his car, carefully lowering Mia into the passenger seat. There wasn't room for them in the cruiser. Ethan didn't argue. He just got in his SUV and followed behind us, slow as molasses. On the drive over, the detective sent me a short video clip. Lila was sitting on a bench, wrapped in a fuzzy blanket, sipping apple juice. Her hair was messy, her sneakers scuffed, but it was her. It was my girl. All the tension drained out of me at once. I slumped against the window, silent tears pouring down my face, and for the first time in 36 hours, I breathed. Eleanor sat quiet beside me for a long minute. Then she leaned in, her voice low, so quiet only I could hear. "That divorce you asked for, if you're serious about it, I'll help you that I can make sure Ethan can't threaten your family anymore. Without that leverage holding you down, if you stand your ground, you can get out for good." I stared straight ahead, watching the city streets blur past the window. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything at all. She knew. She'd always known. She'd watched her son trap me, threaten me, break me, and she'd stood by and let it happen for 8 years. Now that her granddaughter had gotten hurt, suddenly she was ready to play the hero. We pulled up to the precinct. I practically ran inside, and the second Lila saw me, she let out a wail and launched herself into my arms. Mommy, it was so dark outside. I'm sorry I ran. I'll never leave you again. She clung to me, sobbing, her little body shaking. She cried into my shoulder until she had no tears left, then turned and reached for her grandparents, sniffling and playing up how scared she'd been, already knowing they'd dote on her and forget to be mad. Harold and Eleanor melted immediately, cooing over her, promising her every toy and pony she could ever want. I turned to the woman who'd found her, Mrs. Henderson, a street cleaner who'd been out on her route when her son Tommy, who had Down syndrome, had spotted Lila crying by the side of the road. They'd sat with her for 2 hours, waiting for someone to come looking before calling the police. I knelt down in front of her and bowed my head, my voice thick. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough. Let me pay you. Let me. She held up a calloused, work-worn hand and shook her head, smiling soft. Ain't no need, honey. Anybody would have done the same thing. She pulled her hand back like she was afraid her dirty gloves would get my nice clothes dirty, then nodded at Tommy and headed for the door, refusing every single offer of money or help we gave her. Ethan walked in right as they were leaving. Mia opened her mouth immediately, that same fake sweet tone dripping from every word. Clara, don't be mad at him. Okay? The baby was so hungry this morning, we had to stop for breakfast. That's why we're a little late. Ethan didn't say a word to defend himself. He just stared at Lila, who'd buried her face in my leg and refused to look at him. His voice cracked when he spoke. Lila, baby, it's Daddy. Don't you want to say hi? Lila squeezed my leg tighter, her voice small and muffled in my jeans. I don't want a daddy anymore. The bad lady said when her baby comes, Daddy won't love me anymore. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek, then another. He stood there frozen, his mouth open, and couldn't think of a single thing to say. I stroked Lila's hair, my eyes fixed straight ahead, not looking at him at all. Come on, baby, I said, soft and steady. We're going home. The week after we brought Lila home, Ethan moved back into the guest wing of the mansion. He showed up with flowers, apologized a dozen times a day, said he'd cut me off completely, said he'd do anything to fix our family. I didn't let him within 10 feet of me without Lila in the room, and I called my lawyer first thing Monday morning. I'd known Carter since I was 19. He'd handled my grandfather's estate for 30 years, and he was the only person who knew exactly how much money I had to my name. For 8 years, I'd let Ethan think I was just a middle-class girl he'd pulled up from nothing, that I depended on him for every dollar. I had liked it that way. Quiet, invisible, no one expecting anything from me. I'd wanted a simple life, not one built on old money and family name. Ethan had taken even that simple life from me, but I kept my real identity locked away as a safety net I never thought I'd need to use. My parents and my brother showed up at the front door 3 days later, unannounced. My mom marched in first, her face tight with anger, like I'd personally embarrassed her by getting my daughter kidnapped and wanting a divorce. Clara, what on earth are you doing? She snapped, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter like she owned the place. Ethan called your father this morning, crying, saying you're filing for divorce? Are you insane? My brother Tyler leaned against the fridge, rolling his eyes. Yeah, real smart move. If you split with him, I lose my VP spot at Hale Corporation. Do you have any idea how hard I worked for that job? I stirred my coffee slow, not looking up at them. You didn't work for it. I called in a favor to get you hired 3 years ago. You've been stealing from the company expense account for 2 years. Ethan only kept you around because he thought it would keep me in line. My mom's mouth dropped open. You got in that job? But how? You don't have any connections. Ethan's the one with all the power. I have more connections than Ethan could dream of, I said, finally lifting my head. And for the record, I paid off Tyler's $180,000 gambling debt 3 years ago. I bought your house in Florida. I paid for Dad's heart surgery. Every single generous gift you thought came from Ethan, it came from me. Every monthly check, every credit card, every tuition payment for Tyler's kids, all me. Tyler stepped forward, red in the face, like he was about to yell. That's bullshit. You're just a housewife. Where would you get that kind of money? Grandpa left me the entire Hamilton Trust when he died, I said flatly. You all thought he disowned me for dropping out of law school. He didn't. He just agreed I should stay quiet about it, so people would treat me like a real person instead of a walking bank account. The room went dead silent. MY Dad's face went pale. MY Mom stared at me like she'd never seen me before in her life. For 30 years, they'd written me off as the quiet, disappointing daughter, the one who'd never amount to anything next to Golden Boy Tyler. They'd pushed me into Ethan's arms because they thought he was the best I could ever do. All that time, I'd been the one keeping them afloat. You can keep the Florida house, I said, standing up from the table. It's already in your names. But the monthly stipends, the credit cards, Tyler's job, all of it ends the second my divorce is final. You wanted me to be grateful for Ethan? Go be grateful to him, now that I'm done taking care of people who never cared if I was alive or dead, as long as the checks kept coming. Tyler screamed that I was ungrateful, that I'd regret turning my back on family, and my mom cried and said she'd always loved me. She just didn't know how to show it. I didn't believe a word of it. I called security and had them escorted out. They yelled threats the whole way to the door, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. Carter laid out the full investigation file on my kitchen table 2 days later. He'd had his team digging for 2 weeks, ever since I'd called him the night Lila went missing. I told him something about the whole Mia situation never added up, and I'd been right. Mia's real last name is Moore, he said, tapping a headshot. She's been Jake Torres's mistress for 3 years. Jake's wife found out about her 6 months after it started, so Jake asked Ethan to be her public cover. Ethan agreed, turned it into his own little game. I flipped through the pages one by one. Hotel receipts with Jake's name on them, ultrasound photos booked under a fake patient ID, text threads between Ethan and Jake going back 2 full years. You really think this'll work? Jake had written 2 years prior. That your wife will get jealous and finally pay attention to you? She has to, Ethan had replied. Asterisk, she never reacts to anything. If she sees me with another woman, if she thinks I'm leaving her for someone else, she'll have to care. Asterisk. I sat back in my chair, not angry, not sad, just tired. IT was almost funny, in a cruel, pathetic way. 8 years of fear. 8 years of thinking I was trapped in a marriage where he hated me and wanted someone else. All those nights I'd laid awake, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. Every time I flinched when he came home smelling like her perfume, every time I bit my tongue when Mia made snide comments at the house, all of it had been performative, every single bit of it. He hadn't kept me around because he hated me. He kept me around because he was obsessed. He tortured me for 2 years with a fake mistress just to force me to feel something, anything for him. There's more, Carter said, pushing another folder across the table. Hale Corp's balance sheet is a mess. They've been propped up by annual investments from the Hamilton Family Trust for the last 7 years. Your grandfather structured it before he died. He wanted to make sure Ethan never had the power to leave you destitute. Even if he turned on you, the investments auto-renew every January. You can cancel them with one signature. I stared at the numbers. I'd known the trust had a stake in Ethan's company, but I'd never looked at how much IT wasn't just a stake. It was a lifeline. If I pulled the funding, Hale Corp would collapse inside of 3 months. All those years he threatened to ruin my family, I said, half to myself. All those years he thought he held all the power. And the whole time, he was only rich because I let him be. The divorce hearing was held 3 weeks later at the downtown courthouse. Ethan showed up in his best suit, his lawyer right beside him, ready to play the wronged husband. His opening statement was exactly what I expected. He talked about what a good provider he'd been, how I'd grown cold and distant over the years, how I was trying to take his daughter and his money and leave him with nothing. His lawyer even brought up my family, said I'd come from nothing and was only after Ethan's fortune. The courtroom murmured, buying every word of it. I sat there quiet, my hands folded in my lap, while Carter stood up and laid out her case, one piece at a time. First, the proof of coercion, recordings of Ethan threatening my college boyfriend's parents, emails proving he'd paid off Tyler's fiancée to call off the wedding. Police reports from the 3 times I'd tried to run away, sworn statements from former staff who'd seen how he treated me. The judge's face got darker with every page. Second, the Mia Moore lie, Carter played the text threads between Ethan and Jake. He showed the hotel receipts, the ultrasound records, witness statements from clinic staff who'd seen Jake at every appointment, not Ethan. The defendant didn't have an affair, Carter said, looking right at the judge. He staged one. For 2 full years, he used another man's pregnant mistress as a prop to torment his wife, all because he was angry she didn't love him back the way he wanted. He put his own 5-year-old daughter in the middle of it. He let that woman terrorize his child just to win a game no one else was playing. The courtroom went dead silent. He glanced over at Ethan. His face was white as a sheet. He wouldn't look at me. Mia was sitting in the back row. She stood up and tried to leave, but Jake's wife was right there, waiting for her by the door. I didn't stay to watch that fight, but I heard the screaming start before the bailiffs could step in. She'd spent 2 years thinking she was climbing the social ladder, playing the winning hand. She'd just been a pawn the whole time. Third, the money. Carter laid out the trust documents, the investment records, the full scope of my net worth. Ms. Hamilton is the sole beneficiary of the Hamilton Family Trust, valued at approximately $4.2 billion, he said, and the whole courtroom gasped. Hale Corp has received over $180 million in trust funding since 2018. Ms. Hamilton has never relied on the defendant for financial support. In fact, the defendant's entire business depends on her money. Ethan's lawyer actually dropped his pen. Ethan stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Like he was only just realizing the quiet, obedient wife he'd spent 8 years pushing around had never been the powerless girl he thought she was. All those times he'd sneered and told me I'd never survive on my own. All those threats to leave me penniless. He'd been talking to a woman who had 7 times his wealth. My parents and Tyler were in the back of the courtroom too. They'd come to gloat, I think, to watch me lose everything and beg Ethan to take me back. As soon as the hearing adjourned for a break, they pushed through the crowd toward me,